store with the leather on the denim. I ain't the cure, I'm the venom. If you wanna find me, find the taillight. Something's coming in, you're gonna wanna take a red eye. It's time to go. It's time to go. Get ready. Get ready. Get ready. Don't blink, don't blink. Get ready.
Magandang araw po sa inyo, sa mga parte ng mundo kayo naroon. Ito po ang Maestro, Paglinawan. At ang ating pong episode ngayon ay 202. Yung unang 2 ay para sa second year natin, which is 2004. At yung pangalawang 2 ay ang pangalawang episode natin, which is entitled Prevailing Without Gunsmoke. Ayun. Testing China's Red Lines. Ayan po ang title page. No? At bago tayo pumunta sa topic natin for today, ay pagpapatunay po tayo sa ating theme for the year na tinalakay natin last week. Beware of truth decay as we sift the wheat from the weeds. At dito po sa tatlong short videos na sisimulan natin, programa natin ngayon, patutunayan namin sa inyo that truth will prevail. And whenever truth does not prevail, halatang halata po kung sino ang nagsisinungaling. Sa hot copy ay in-interview ni Karen Davila si Associate Justice Antonio Carpio. Pakinggan natin ang unang segment na ating patutungkulan ukol sa Scarborough Shoal.
Well, let's go first to, to Scarborough Shoal, where the Chinese Coast Guard, the water cannon, our BFAR ship that was trying to deliver fuel and Christmas gifts to our fishermen. I have suggested long ago that we should propose to China the ground rules on fishing on Scarborough Shoal, because the tribunal ruled that Scarborough Shoal is a common fishing ground among Filipino, Chinese, and Vietnamese fishermen. So what we should do is to lay the ground rules, because we must determine how many tons per year can each side catch there, and we have to also to allow the fish to recover. So there will be a fishing season and an off season for fishing. But if we should propose that to China and to Vietnam, if they don't agree, then we go to the tribunal to ask the tribunal to fix the ground rules based on our recommendation. Because otherwise, China will be dictating the terms, and we are at the losing end. We should proactively now propose what are the ground rules.
Medyo nagka-amnesia yata si Antonio Carpio. Nakalimutan niya na noong 2012 ay kinonsid natin ang control ng Scarborough Shoal sa China when Noynoy Aquino, on the advice of Secretary of Foreign Affairs Albert Del Rosario, withdrew our Philippine Navy ship, the BRP, Gregorio del Pilar, from Scarborough. And meron na diyang protocol na existing. Lagi nilang pinaulit-ulit na ayaw daw pag nisdain dyan ng mga Pilipino. Eh, wala naman nagre-reklamo kundi sila. And itong BFAR ship, no? Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, ay pumapasok dyan sa lagoon ng Scarborough Shoal. At ulitin natin, may lagoon dyan sa Scarborough Shoal, sa loob, at yan ay gwardyado mga kabansa. Ng China, yan ang pinoproteksyonan. And mukhang hindi alam yan ni Antonio Carpio. At pinalalabas pa niya na walang ground rules dyan. And of course, since they are in control, hindi naman pwedeng, since sila may control ng area, we have to observe ang kanilang guidelines dyan. And it has already been decided. Some sort of a fisheries noong panahon ni Duterte, nakabalik na ho dyan sa shoal. Bawal lamang doon sa lagoon. Alright? So, we have to remind, no? Because otherwise, the truth will decay. Okay. Sa pangalawa naman na area, yung Ayungin Shoal, eto naman ang sinasabi ni Carpio at meron tayong sorpresa dito. Let us play the second.
Now,
Okay.
in Ayungin Shoal, the problem there is, again, the water cannoning of our resupply ships. But the tribunal ruled that the harassment of our resupply ships constitute a military activity outside the jurisdiction of the tribunal. So I think we should shift the activity from military to civilian. So we should instead erect there a civilian structure like a lighthouse or a marine research center, and send materials there to construct this marine research center and or the lighthouse. And if the Chinese stop us, then we go back to the tribunal, which will now have jurisdiction, because what we are trying to build is a civilian structure. And under the ruling, the Ayungin Shoal is part of our EEZ, and in the EEZ, the coastal state, the Philippines, has exclusive right to erect structures that are intended to preserve and protect the marine environment. Because unless we have people there in the shoal, the Chinese militia, maritime militia, might again destroy the coral reefs just to get the giant clams there.
Ayan, mga kabansa, no? Unang-una, nagbabago na ho ang isip after 12 years, no? Ng pagsisinungaling nito si Carpio. Nagbabago na ang isip niya. At finally, after 12 years, nabasa na niya yung provision ng paragraph 1161 proclaiming Ayungin Shoal as quote-unquote sa paragraph 1161 ng arbitral ruling mismo that it is a quintessentially militarized area. At dahil dito, nagko-conflict yan sa kine-claim niya at ng karamihan noon na meron tayong EEZ dyan. What is an EEZ? 200 nautical miles from Palawan, from our nearest shore ay exclusive economic zone. Ngayon ang Ayungin Shoal, 115 nautical miles. Kaya pasok po siya. Pero, defaulted siya from being considered as an EEZ because militarized yung area. At ang sinasabi ni Carpio, and is contradicting the government and the defense position, is that we should civilianize it. And I will explain to you why later. Kung bakit yan ang priority ni Carpio. Now, ang question ko kay Antonio Carpio, anong gagawin mo ngayon sa BRP Sierra Madre? Di paaalis mo yan dyan. Because it was the Philippines that militarized the area. At the presence of the BRP Sierra Madre militarizes the area because we are keeping a marine outpost there inside the ship. So ano yung gagawin? And this is a dilemma for Carpio dahil kailangan i-civilianize and is proposing. Otherwise daw, papasok dyan yung militia vessels at ano itong kalokohan sinasabi mo na masisira yung mga giant clubs dyan. You have to be consistent. Hindi yung pag anong-ganon, no? Anyway, pumunta na tayo sa third video dahil nandito ang motivasyon nito si Antonio Carpio. Let's play the third video.
But in the case of getting the gas in Reed Bank, which I think is the more important problem, because it affects the economy. Malampay is running out of gas, and the only replacement is Reed Bank, unless we import a very expensive LNG. Now, we follow the example of Malaysia and Indonesia. They did not ask for the permission of China. They just went to their EEZ, got the surveyed and drilled with the help of the US and Australian warships. In the case of Malaysia and Indonesia, was supported by the US with the US aircraft carrier Ronald Reagan, who happened to pass by. That is the formula. We don't need to get the consent of China. It's ours. So we just go there and get it with the support of the US. And the US has already said they are willing to join us in a joint patrol while our survey ship will be there in Reed Bank. That is, I think, the most important issue that we have to face, because unless we find a replacement for Malampaya, our economy will be in extreme condition.
Yan ang bottom line ni Antonio Carpio, yung gas and oil exploration. Because gusto niya matuloy yung project dyan ng Forum Energy at saka ng Phoenix Mining na pag-aari ni Manny Pangilinan at ni nasirang Albert de Rosario. No? At siya ang nag-aabogado dyan. Yan ho ang bottom line din ng Strat-based Albert de Rosario Institute. Ngayon, dismissively, sinasabi niya, atin yan. Of course, hindi atin yan. The Philippines, even if assuming there is an entitlement for the EEZ, no, hindi atin yan. Hanggang doon lang tayo sa 12 nautical miles of territorial sea. Yun, pwede nyo sabihin, atin yan. But you are confusing the public, deliberately misleading the public with your atin ito and your Christmas convoy projects, by making the public believe that 200 nautical miles forward, atin yan. Excuse me. Paano kung may overlap? And in this case, ang overlap to our sovereignty rights is a claim of sovereignty with China. And the next question is, who is in control of the area? We don't have the control of the area. And yet, we sent out there in violation of protocols earlier. Kasi ho, mga kabansa, kung walang protocol yan for the past 24 years, nagutom, namatay na sana yung mga soldiers natin dyan sa BRP Sierra Madre. But the supply mission continues. But during this year, as we will discuss in detail later and refer to later, binago ho ni Bongbong Marcos ang palakad, no, natin dito sa mga areas na ito. And tayo ang nagdi-depart, no? Wala na tayo doon sa pinag-usapan. During the time of Duterte, the Coast Guards were talking to each other. They were calling each other. There was open communication. Wala na ho ngayon yan. Dahil sa atin ito, mindset ng mga nanunungkulan ngayon, basta na lamang maglalabas dyan ng misyon na walang impormasyon ng kabila. That is in effect what China is referring to as a provocation. At pag may ginawa ang China, sasabihin natin aggressive behavior and harassment of our supply? No. As we have established here and again, China is there because their claim is based on historic rights of sovereignty by historic rights and by customary law because they are in effective control of the area. So what they're doing is not aggression, it is not harassment, according to the propaganda language of our side, which we borrowed from the Americans. It is law enforcement. So, diyan ho, nagkakano, pati yung BRP, Sierra Madre, paalisin ni Antonio Carpio. Bakit? To civilian rights. Yung in Seoul, which is almost the entrance to the Ridback. Malapit na po yan sa Ridback. Kaya, yan ang gusto ni Carpio dahil sa mga oligarko at mga vested interest, foreign interest po yan, ha? Indonesian oligarchy. Yan ho ang mga nire-represent niyang mga bottom line nila. So, pinaalam lang namin sa inyo yan, mga kabansa. Because pag hindi nyo alam yan, sa mga lingwahe ng mga ito, pa-ekis-ekis, ang China consistent. They identified the red line, they've been consistent, and they have not budged an inch. Ang Pilipinas, depende kung sino ang may hawak ng timon sa Malacanang. And in 2023, what started was the beginning of the World War propaganda. No? Bakit po? Dahil dito sa isang nagpa-piper na retired US Air Force Colonel na si Raymond Powell, acting as Lone Ranger, at meron siyang Commodore J. Tariana of the Philippine Coast Guard, excuse me, as his tonto. Siya ay capture in promising an innovation over the Noynoy Aquino's lawfare and disinformation towards towing China's steely determination to preserve its sovereignty over almost all of the South China Sea. In other words, they have turned the bilateral consultative mechanism where the two parties are consulting with one another and coordinating their action into a confrontation. Pilipinas ho ang nagbago ng estilo under Bobo Marcos. No? Wala namang bagong narrative ang nilabas nilang Project Museu. Wala namang inspiring story. Ang nagkaroon lamang ay nothing but a fat budget from the 500 million allocation of the America Competes Act to the U.S. Agency for Global Media Affairs, Radio Free Asia, and Benar News, panel and echoed sa ating professional oligarchic press. Professional natura, mainstream kayo. Hindi naman yung nilalabas ang katotohanan. At ano nilabas nyo? The same old discredited tales. At mga tactics. So, sabi ninyo, by promoting transparency, ayan ang objective. Ang problema daw ng panahon ni Noynoy Aquino ay walang masyado nakakalam kung ano nangyayari doon sa loob. So ngayon, ilalabas nila. Okay. Pero sa akin, media hype lang po yan ang nabago. Ano ang resulta? Only 25 nations, the US and its European allies, in addition to Japan, Australia, and South Korea. 25 lamang. Ngayon na lang member ng United Nations. Tapos sasabihin nyo, 25 lang, may international recognition na kayo. Hello! Aba naman. So itong Project Museu, na tinawag nila will provide a light to the sea, pagliliwanag daw ng karagatan, sea light. Ano nangyari? Sa ating pong population, only 7%, 7% ng ating populasyon considered it as an urgent issue. No? For the meantime, aminado US Naval Institute, ito, mismo sa papel nila, kinuha ko sa website nila, that China was prepared from the very start. Kaya kahiya-hiya tayo na lumalabas, even among the ASEAN nations. Handa sila how the Chinese strategies challenge international norms in a war without Gunsmoke. Ang international norms lang naman ho na challenge dito ay yung mga provisiones ng UNCLOS na misinterpreted by the arbitral ruling in favor of the Philippines. But later on, we find out na hindi rin pala victory para sa atin yan. Nag-concede ang US Naval Institute, sabi niya, 3 actions created dilemmas for its joint forces, undermined allied and partner confidence in the US resolve, and allowed China to incrementally expand positional advantage to contest and, if necessary, strike US vital interests first. Bakit hindi maunahan ang resident country? Hindi naman US. The resident country in the region is China and the Philippines, for that matter. The Naval Institute said China preempted the US by first unleashing legal warfare. Kasi binarata natin ng lawfare, ng legal warfare. Dumulog tayo sa arbitration. Walang tayo ng kakampi. Providing the basis for launching an attack. Number 2, while public opinion warfare delegitimized the adversary. Sino ang lumalabas na adversary dito? US. And psychological warfare demoralized it. Every time the Philippines will veer a little bit outside of the established protocols, walang flexibility. Iwa-water cannon ka, i-green laser ka, i-acoustics ka. But the US Naval Institute concedes, therefore, when engaged against the United States, the combination of these 3 modifies regional expectations and raises doubts about the legitimacy of the US presence. So yan ngayon ang problema ng Amerika. Kaya sinubukan nila in 2023 na magpalabas ng Project Mushu. Well, it failed miserably because of the reasons we mentioned earlier. Puro usok, walang apoy. Puro forma, walang sustansya. Puro informasyon, walang narrative na accept sa mga tao. The whole failure was exposed and considered in an article entitled Prevailing Without Gunsmoke in the South China Sea. Ito po ay paper ng US military written by Colonel Wendell Lembar, U.S. Marine Corps and retired Lieutenant Colonel Eric Duckworth, U.S. Army. At ito ay nilabas nila noong November 2022 sa kanilang website. Lembar and Duckworth could very well be Powell's replacement. Baka sila na kapalit ni Powell dahil yung Mushu ni Powell ay nag-fail. As his Gorgon Nut Center, diyan po ang ginamit na cover ni Raymond Powell for the U.S. military, specifically the U.S. Naval Institute, the Stanford University's Gorgon Nut Center for National Security Innovation, na instead of disentanglements and lessening the tension in the contentious South China Sea, ay nag-create pa itong Gojurat ng mas marami pang Gojurats. Ito po ay medyo panlaban daw sa China's gray zone strategies and tactics. Ito ba? Ito na nga ba? Ang tinatawag ni PBBM's call for a paradigm shift, kasi sabi niya, kailangan magpalit. Hindi nagkiklik yung mga ginagawa na militar, Coast Guard, National Security Advisor, kung sino-sino pang nakikihalubilo dyan. Nilagay nila sa isang tabi ang Department of Foreign Affairs, samantalang Department of Foreign Affairs dapat ang nangunguna. Pero dahil DFA is for diplomacy, nilabas nila, at itong mga security, nilabas nilang gano'n sa front, anong tawag mo dyan? Confrontation. Kung may confrontation strategy, sino nagpo-promote? Ang China nandiyan lang. Steady sila. China has intensified beyond lawfare propaganda into psychological warfare. Yun na, yung paggamit ng mga gamit na yun. Pero ano ba ginawa ng China dyan? Were they violating international law? Of course not. Yun lang ang sinasabi ng Pilipinas. Ang tawag ho dyan sa Geneva Convention, dalawang Geneva Convention na naganap, ang tawag dyan, non-lethal weapons, NLWs. Pero hindi ito alam ng karamihan. The use of non-lethal weapons. Ano ibig sabihin ng lethal? Nakakamatay. Nakaka-severely injured. Ang paggamit ng non-lethal means in law enforcement where lethal force is not ordinarily suitable to achieve order. Bakit? Dahil pagkaputo ka na, gera na. Pero ito ay bago pa man tumating doon sa Gunsmoke. Kaya na, ang title natin ngayon is How to Prevail Before the Gunsmoke. Pero ang US Naval Institute ay nagtalaga ng isang step forward sa non-lethal weapons, mga kabansa, yung water cannon, yung green laser, yung acoustics na ginagamit ng China, yung mga jamming devices na ginagamit. Those are non-lethal weapons. Ito non-lethal weapons, ito ang actual Gunsmoke, bakbakan. Naglagay in between dyan ng tinatawag ng America na intermediate force capabilities. Alam niyo, Amerika, napakagaling sa mga terminolohiya ganito eh. At itong video ito, mga kabansa, i-annotate ko yung video, no? So, lagyan natin, huwag mong alisin ang audio ko. Sasapaw ako. Palabas natin itong video ng US Naval Institute. Non-lethal weapons program ng Department of Defense. Modern warfare has changed, sabi niya. Ito ang defense strategy from cooperation, competition below armed conflict, and finally armed conflict. Doon siya sa kita. Ano yung mga intermediate force capabilities na yan o IFC? To be used in irregular warfare in Europe, Middle East, and now in Asia. Rather than engage in lethal, pakakalaban daw ng America results to propaganda, civil unrest, and other means. Katulad ng ginawa ng Russia doon sa Little Green drones ng mga nag-threaten sa US bases in Japan, little fishing boats. Para nagsusupport, deterrent. Funding decision. Delay. May kakaroon delay. Help to prevent unnecessary destruction and loss of life. Boosting versatility and adaptability. Strategic risk mitigation. Enable war fighters to bridge the gap between non-lethal and lethal. Ito ang mga sample nila. Flashbang warning. High-power microwave directed energy. Millimeter wave deep denial directed energy. Directed acoustic. Entanglement occlusion. Laser-induced flashbang. Conducive lasers, dazzling lasers, and more. Very pacific Japanese. Ayun. Saan i-apply? Sa South China Sea. Ayan. Explain natin kung bakit. Several nations. And this practice, yan na mga kabansa. Yan na, alam na natin. So, let's cut the video there and let's go to our lecture. Tuloy-tuloy natin lecture. Ayun, pinapakita namin sa inyo, mga kabansa. Ha? Oh, ang lalim na research natin dito, no, mga kabansa. Ito ba alam ni Antonio Cardio? Ito ba alam ni Jay Tariela? Of course, alam to ni Raymond Powell, kaya ginagamit sila. Sabi, nakakahiya dito mga kabansa. They are fighting now for Philippine sovereignty. Pero ang nagdidirect na buong approach, ang mastermind ay si Raymond Powell, isang retired U.S. Air Force Colonel. Pinagkalaban yung sovereignty. Hoy, Kimochidoro! Di ba nyo naiintindihan ko nung ginagawa nyo? May gulay. Oh, andyan lang. Isa lamang dito sa mga kanilang mga ehemplo, itong huli, occlusion technology na tawa ko dito Parang slime ito na ibabato nila sa may propeller ng barko at because of the slime, it will disable the propeller. Yung huli. The others were already shown. No? They're mainly just electronic jamming and confusion strategy. No? So let's go on. Oh. Bakit? Ito. Nakita nyo ba yan? O, i-play natin kung saan nila gagamitin, Ber. Itong PCG Rappler. At ako'y magbo-voice over din. Ito na ho yung sinasabi kanina. The swarm. Alright. Let's play the video. Ayan ho, nakita nyo? Ang daming barko ng China besides its Coast Guard and its Navy. No? Yan ang kanilang people power. If you remember mga kabansa, sa ground battle sa Korea, ano ang nagpasuko para mag-lead to armistice. Ano nagpasuko sa mga Amerikano para itigil ang gera sa Korea through an armistice that created the 38 parallel. human wave, mga kabansa. At yun ang natunghayan ng mga Pilipino na nagpunta sa Korea para ipaglaban ang gera ng Amerika sa Korea. Right. At dahil walang puknat mga kabansa, dito naman sa karagatan, ganun din ang nangyayari. People power. Dito naman, ship power. Yan mga kabansa ang marami mga assets ng China. And, ito tinatawag ng Amerika na unconventional forces, People's Armed Forces Maritime Militia, CMM. They're basically fishing vessels that can be commissioned to assist in the defense of China. Ay mahirap tapatan ito. Because they're capable of border patrol, surveillance, reconnaissance, maritime transport, search and rescue, and auxiliary support for maritime operations. So pinakita natin kanina mga kabansa ay fishing boats. But pagdating dito sa militia, ayan mga fishing boats yan, nakita niyo yung Coast Guard nandun sa kanan at meron dito sa kaliwa na isa. But they move in tandem. And they are assisted by this militia na pinakita natin sa video. Approximately 300 po yan as of now. As of August 2018. No? Pag humarang yan, mga kabansa, wala hong mga armas yan. Pero pag humarang yan, paano na? Banggaan na at sea. They will pose a safety hazard and asymmetric threat. No? Alright. So ayan, dito sa tekstong ito, makikita natin na sometime in April 2021, 240 of these militia vessels were reported by the National Task Force for the West Philippine Sea into 136 na sa Burgos, 6 sa Juan Felipe, 65 sa Bacchenan, 6 sa Paglinawan, 3 sa Zamora, 4 sa Pag-asa, 1 sa Likas, 5 sa Kota, at 11 sa Ayungin Shore. So they're everywhere, mga kabansa. And here is the statement of Gray Pollen. Mismo si Gray Pollen at nagkukonsinta. Gray Pollen is from the Center for Strategic and International Studies. So let's play this tape para marinig nila ang threat na talaga nito. And even Gray Pollen himself, yung pinakamalakas na think tank, supporting the Albert de Rosario Institute and the Asia Maritime as transparency as agents for the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Let us watch this video. Damdamin ninyo ang sinasabi ni Greg Pollen mismo.
China is asserting claims to all the waters and airspace of the South China Sea. And they're doing it not primarily with military or law enforcement vessels. They're doing it with an armed militia that camouflages itself by operating on fishing boats. The maritime militia is really the tip of the spear for China's power projection in the South China Sea. So the South China Sea is the most contested piece of geography on the planet. The largest recent deployment we've seen of this militia has taken place over the last 7 months around Thitu Island, which is occupied by about 100 Filipino civilians and a small military contingent. China has had dozens of these militia boats surrounding the island every day. On a shot from December 20th, what you see is 95 Chinese boats, the heaviest day that we have monitored around this feature. Every one of them are large, none of them broadcasting the signals that they should be to avoid collisions, none of them with nets or other gear in the water, none of them fishing. They just sit there for long periods of time, monitoring and intimidating the Filipinos. It seems clear that China's goal in the South China Sea is to establish effective dominance of all the waters and airspace within what they call the 9-dash line. They don't want to do that by fighting a military conflict with the United States or anybody else. What they want to do is use civilian actors, these paramilitary forces, to effectively control the space, make it impossible for their neighbors to operate, and therefore win without ever having to fight. The US needs to turn away from strictly military responses. The US Navy has a role in deterring outright aggression and backing up our partners. But the US Navy cannot secure fishing rights for Filipinos. It can't secure law enforcement rights for the neighbors. The only thing that can do that is a diplomatic and maybe economic effort and try to convince China to modify its claims and especially its behavior, to take these paramilitary forces off the board before there's a crisis.
There you go. Oh. Mismo na ho, think tank nila, nagko-concede na dyan. No? And iba yung doon sa Taiwan. Dito pa lang tayo sa South China Sea. Kaya si Presidente Marcos, in desperation, nagre-require ng paradigm shift because sabi niya, our current diplomatic efforts with Beijing are going in a poor direction. Actually, mali ka. Security approach ang inuna mo eh. Wala naman. Itinabi nyo nga siya. Sabi ko nga kanina, tinabi nyo si Enrique Malalo. At pinaunan nyo itong new expanded Philippine Coast Guard. Oh. Magsalita yan si Tariela. Inaakusahan niya tayo na nagdalagay ng mga katotohanan sa mata ng lipunan ng mga traidor. Because the reality, the facts support China. Pero siya sabi niya, state-sponsored daw ang mga dissenting opinion. Napaka-grabe mo naman, Tariela. Ikaw ang fake dyan. Kayo nga, Coast Guard, you are US funded. You are actually being run by the US Department of Homeland Security. Kayo tumatanggap ng pera dyan. Kaya huwag kayo magmamaangan dyan. At yan, alam ni Commandant Gaban ngayon. Very careful si Commandant Gaban. No? Ano nangyari tuloy? Kung sino-sino nagsasalita last year. It was almost a circus. Going as far as a middle-ranking officers making foreign policy pronouncements. That this Chinese spokesman termed it as appropriately as self-amusement. So sabi ni Marcos, we have to do something we have not done before. We have to come up with a new concept, a new principle, a new idea. A paradigm shift is something that we have to formulate. All the paradigm shift, bongbong, that you have to do is to go back to the established protocols before you went in and you said, I am not aware of those agreements, and if there were any, I rescind them. Ikaw ang nagdeparte. Maayos na yan ang panahon ni Duterte. And even Jaime Marcos in May 18, 2021, pakita natin itong meme ni Jaime Marcos. Sabi niya, the arbitral decision may have invalidated China's 9-dash line claim but also shrunk the Philippine sovereign claims in the Kalayaan Island Group. Na-explain na natin ito in past programs. The result of that declaration is that some rocks are entitled to a territorial sea but none are entitled to EEZ. This is a fact not suppressed. Ayan. Tama si Amy dito. This is a fact long suppressed by those who failed at diplomacy and now promote a more belligerent confrontation with China. So ano ang Chinese response? Ha? Abay, magising na tayo. Ha? Bakit gusto ng Coast Guard? Bakit gusto ng Navy? Bakit gusto ng National Defense natin at National Security Agency? Dahil nagpapalusot ho sila ng mga construction materials para dyan sa BRP Sierra Madre. Pero panahon ni Duterte, open lahat. Nag-uusap. Nakakatipid pa tayo sa crudo dahil yung resupply mission, ine-escortan pa ng Chinese Coast Guard. So we really did have to be very, very active in the area. China merely enforces approved norms under the United Nations Code of Conduct for the Law Enforcement and Use of Force. Yan, Antonio Carpio, ground rules na hinahanap mo, andyan na sa Code of Conduct for Law Enforcement and Relative Use of Force. No provocation, no enforcement response. Diba? Wala kayong unpredicted moves. You're predictable. There's no need for water cannon. You're predictable. There's no need for drill laser. There's no need for acoustics or jamming. Because gusto nyo, yung transparency will project China if they apply those non-lethal weapons as the bully, when actually we are the ones escalating the tension. And on December 28 last year, Senior Colonel Wu Qian, spokesman for the Chinese Ministry of National Defense, ano sabi niya? The Philippine side claimed to be carrying humanitarian aid, but a large number of media journalists were on board the cargo ship and many fake news were sent out. So hindi ito, innocent passage, mga kabasa. Because there is propaganda. Tingnan nyo ang Article 18 at Article 19 mismo ng UNCLOS defining freedom of navigation as qualified by innocent passage. At sinasabi ninyo, mamaya, ano sabi nito si Wu Qian? This is not what humanitarian aid is. This is completely a show of porcelain. So, ayan ang problema. It is clear that against President Marcos's best wishes or palusot, China has not blinked. On the evening of January 3, the Hong Kong Chinese News Agency announced that the PLA on 2 days, Southern Theater Command, ito na po, on high alert at all times, resolutely safeguarding national sovereignty, security, maritime rights and interests, and are fully in control of any military activities that disrupt the South China Sea and create hotspots. This sounds to me as war. So we end the topic for today with this discussion. Mainit na po. And Marcos, the U.S. has already lost options here. Anong susunod ninyo? Intermediate? IFCs? Ewan natin. But we don't have, this is a recording, so we will not have audience participation. And at this juncture, mga kabansa, I am just calling your attention that we have extended the book sale to Valentine at a slightly increased price kasi po yung subsidy natin ng Pasko na binigay ng JRS ay hindi na po ibinigay after January 1st. So, If you want buy 3 books, it's 2,499 or 2,500. And yung first 2 books, ko po, 1,500 with free delivery. Just call or text, better yet, text 0917-336-4366 for details. Just text 0917-336-4366 for details. Ayan po mga kabansa. No? While supply lasts, because there is already a reorder for reprint for possible sequel for 2024 on each and every one of these books. So the earlier you order, 0917-336-4366. Bilang panghuling konklusyon for today, dapat itong mga pronouncements ng China tungkol sa mga red line nila ay we have to take them seriously and we should act responsibly. Pero marami mga pa-etyos. Unang-una, may reference sa Mutual Defense Treaty. Sorry po, ang Mutual Defense Treaty is only when there is an armed attack, and the Mutual Defense Treaty, as well as the Visiting Forces Agreement, as well as the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, is now illegal vis-à-vis Article 18, Section 25 of the 1987 Constitution. Napakagaling natin sa mga legal-legal, pero tayong una nagbabayolate ng ating konstitusyon. Ano sinasabi? That after the expiration in 1991 of the agreement between the Republic of the Philippines and the USA concerning military bases. Foreign military bases, troops, and facilities shall not be allowed in the Philippines except under a treaty duly concurred by the Senate and when Congress so requires. Ratified by a majority of the votes cast by the people in the national referendum and recognized by the other side as a treaty. So hindi pwedeng tayo lang. Kailangan na doon. A Mutual Defense Treaty po, wala po sanction niya, wala ratification niya by the US. By the US Senate. And the same thing with a BFA, may ratification on our side, so with the Mutual Defense Treaty, pero wala on the side of the US. And of course, itong Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agency, it's just an executive agreement. It's not even a treaty. So we are openly violating our own law, our own basic law. So we have to do something about this. Hindi naman sa ayaw natin, pero habang nandiyan nakasulat to, enforce natin ito. At kayo mismo, sa Department of National Defense, look at this because you're supposed to be the armed forces of the Philippines, the protector of the people and the state. And the organic act of the state is the Constitution. Mga ground rules ka dyan, Antonio Carpio. What about obeying the Constitution first? Bongbong Marcos, are you listening? So Mutual Defense Treaty does not apply to joint patrols. International law, joint patrols are illegal. Site kayo ng site. Bang-uplos. But our legalisms are empty and China will not submit to lawfare. Hindi sila mag-blink dyan. Eh, hindi ba define sa UCLOS sa Article 18? The innocent passage? Ano siya sabi ninyo? Nagpunta rin sa EEC, atin ito. Nando kami sa EEC, winaterkano kami. Hey! That is no longer your territorial sea. And in the territorial sea, the principle of innocent passage applies. sa teritoryo, sa 12 nautical miles. Eh, paano pa doon sa 200? For sure, with more reason. It involves foreign assets other than the coastal states. The United States is obviously neither a coastal or a claimant state, mali ito. Claimant state, and worse, not even a member of UNCLOS. Hirap sa US Hindi member ng UNCLOS, pero ginagamit ang UNCLOS pagpukpok sa ulo natin. Sunod naman tayo ng sunod. Ano ang specific prohibitions? Tingnan nyo nga. Yung last joint exercise with 3 ships of the United States. Exercise or practice with weapons of any kind. Applicable or not? Yes. An act aimed at collecting information to the prejudice of the defense or security of the coastal state. Ano pa yung Poseidon spy plane dyan? Yes. Any act of propaganda aimed at affecting defense or security of the coastal state. Ano yung mga press on board of your Coast Guard? Para kayo nagsushow business niya. Yes! Launching, landing, and taking off on board of an aircraft and of any military device. Hindi ba yung helicopter natin? Pinakita pa sa TV, nagla-landing to sa aircraft carrier ng Amerika? Yes! And other activity not having a direct bearing on passage. Freedom of navigation is from point A to point B, diretso lang, walang para, walang load, walang propaganda, walang ano. So yan mga kabansa. Huwag tayong masyadong smart, Alec. Ugali natin mga Pilipino yan, nakakahiya tayo sa mundo. Nagtatawanan tayo ng Vietnam, ng Thailand, ng Indonesia. Kakakalit pa lang dito ni Widodo. Sus. So, ano gagawin ng Amerika ngayon? Hindi gagatungan na lang tayo ng gagatungan. Tayo, ibabala sa kanyon. Nakakalungkot, mga kapatid. Samantalang all the while, meron namang formula na pinagtibay na ni Presidente Marcos Sr. sa pagbubukas ng diplomatic relations with China. At sinubukang i-implement ni Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo with the Joint Seismic Memorandum of Understanding. Tinetest niya yung waters. In panahon ni Duterte. Bakit tayo nandito ngayon? Bakit tayo nandito ngayon? May suggestion on the diplomatic front that the U.S. suggestion coming from the Congressional Research Survey of the U.S. Congress. Consider the merits of ratifying the UNCLOS, sabi niya, sa Amerika. Hindi po gagawin ng Amerika yan. Because America is the #1 violator of international law. And engage with Israel right now in a genocide in Gaza. And has not won any wars. Yet, ano ang solusyon? It is an American himself who provides the solution. John F. Kennedy said, "Let us never negotiate out of fear." Ayusin natin kung ano yung talagang presupwesto natin. Hanggang sovereignty rights lang tayo. Huwag na tayo maghanap na sa buong kagampan ba yung tawag siya? Paghahangad ng mas malaki pa. Let us behave with what we have and what we can do and what we can commit. And let us be open with our needs. Because we are talking to a donor country. Malaki ho ang puso We're not even talking to the Americans who require reciprocity every time they give something, they want something. So sabi ni Kennedy, let us negotiate out of fear. And we are out of fear if we know exactly our position objectively without abusing it. And secondly, but let us not fear to negotiate. Ang solusyon po sa ating mga problema ngayon is very simple. China itself has given us the formula: bilateral negotiation. No third parties. Heart-to-heart talk. People to people. We have been welded and melted. Two friendly nations. We cannot escape the fact that we are the closest neighbor to China. So let us take advantage of that goodwill. Ito po ang lingkod. Ado Paglinawan, tandaan natin. Let us never negotiate out of fear, but let us never fear to negotiate. Magkita-kita po tayo next week at magandang araw, magandang gabi sa mga parte kayo ng mundo naroroon. Ito po ang inyong lingkod again, ang Maestro. Ado Paglinawan, nagpapaalam na.
Get ready.